My name is Heath McMichael and I'm branch president. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet and pay my respects to elders past and present. Also, I'd like to say it's great to see a number of familiar faces and we welcome in particular our friends from the Bangladesh High Commission and from other embassies as well. And also a friend and former president of the ACT branch, Bob Lowry, who's joining us from the Sydney Northern Beaches, no doubt finding it too hot down there, coming back to Canberra. Tonight, we return to a part of the world we visit from time to time, South Asia. This time, we're taking a good look at one of the most dynamic countries in the region, Bangladesh, and Bangladesh's outlook, not only on its immediate region, but on the wider Asia-Pacific. In Australia, at least, there has been a tendency to view Bangladesh as a country mired in natural disaster and having to manage difficult relations with pesky neighbours over rivers and other issues. But a new picture is emerging of Bangladesh where modern sectors of the economy, such as IT, are being leveraged to drive economic growth. For example, it's been estimated that since 2005, Bangladesh's share of the world's online freelance workforce in digitally delivered services such as call centres and back office support has grown to 14%. So, given its flourishing economic trajectory, demographic dividend and strategic location in South Asia, what is the potential for Bangladesh to emerge as a key player in the Asia-Pacific region? Well, our expert speaker tonight will cover those questions for us. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome to the ACT branch the High Commissioner of the People's Republic of Bangladesh in Australia, His Excellency Mr. M. Allama Siddiki. High Commissioner Siddiki presented his credentials in November 2022, and he is concurrently accredited to New Zealand, where he's just come back from, I believe, Fiji, Solomon Islands, Vanuatu, and Samoa. Keeps him busy on that. Before taking up his assignment in Australia, Ambassador Siddiki served as ambassador to Turkey between 2015 and 2020, and Denmark 2020 to 2022. He has worked in various roles in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Dhaka and has had postings in Tokyo, Kolkata, Islamabad, and London. He was awarded a Master of Social Science in Public Administration from the University of Dhaka. Now, as per our normal format, the High Commissioner will speak for 20 minutes or so before we go to questions from participants in-house and from those online using the Q&A function on Zoom. And we aim to finish at 7 p.m. sharp. So let me hand over to the High Commissioner. Please, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for offering me the opportunity to be here at your institute. It is a very well-known platform, and we should try to make better use of all such platforms available in Australia and in other places where I'm concurrently accredited to talk about the possibilities with regard to Bangladesh. I normally do not prefer to speak by reading, and I think that is a safe bet and better. But I have not I have not developed my habit into that. So what I try to do is to somehow relate myself to some paper which I have in hand and fall back upon points so that I do not disassociate myself from the main ideas of today's topic. And thank you very much for your kind presence. Your presence is an encouragement for us, I mean for my country, for my High Commissioner. And I hope to keep in touch with your institution more and more. In today's topic, there are broadly two subjects. One is Bangladesh, and the other one is Indo-Pacific region. And it is a very vast topic, I'm afraid. And I may not be able to actually do justice to the two parts of the topic, keeping a balance between the two topics or subtopics in terms of attention, focus, and time spent. However, let me begin by saying that the earth that we live in, as humans are basically terrestrial animals or creatures. So we had the tendency to look at the planet where we inhabit, which we inhabit, from the point of view of our domain. And our domain is Earth. So we have given comfortably this name, Earth, to the planet that we inhabit. Overlooking the fact that 3/4 of the Earth or so is basically covered by water. So say if there is a spaceship coming into Earth's atmosphere, it would look at the Earth and it would have the people in the spaceship would have the tendency possibly to call this planet Oceania, because it is basically vast oceans that you see from a distance when you look at the Earth. And with technological advancement and with population pressure, with more and more penchant for prosperity, an kind of an egalitarian approach and aspiration to have a fair share of the Earth's resources and prosperity thereof. We are almost killing the planet, right? We are under duress due to our, to some extent, unethical and to some extent unequal attitude to utilize the resources available in this planet. However, these changes have also brought in new perspectives with time passing. For example, in the ancient time, people used to think about world in terms of Mediterranean Sea. And people used to call, all the civilizational agents surrounding Mediterranean basin used to look at the basin, look at the sea, and think that this is the Earth. And all geopolitics of that time was concentrated around Mediterranean. Wars were fought over the control of Mediterranean, for example, between the Persians and the Romans, for example, between the North African power and Roman power, for example. But then with more and more adventures into the sea, we have come to know about other larger, massive ocean bodies. In the ancient time, Indian Ocean used to be known in some literature as Great Middle Bay, for example. And all the oceans are there. So Indian Ocean is the heart of Asia and Pacific, and it used to be called Large or Great Middle Bay. If you start from that point of view, and if you move to the north from the center of Indian Ocean, then you will find a place which is called Bay of Bengal. And Bay of Bengal is actually a triangular shape of water body covering about 2.1 million square kilometers of land. And at the top of that Bay of Bengal sits Bangladesh or Bengal. In the audience today, we have two people from the other part of Bengal, which is now inside India, smaller Bengal. The larger Bengal today is known as Bangladesh. We are actually, in cultural sense of the term, we are the same people. You can say that it's like, if I say, it may sound a bit audacious that we are a divided nation. Even I may have the romantic idea of calling ourselves a nation. So Bengalis are divided along the border. Coming back to the topic, Bay of Bengal and Indian Ocean, actually, and Indo-Pacific region, actually is the largest depository of diverse ecosystems. There are about 10 diverse and different ecosystems covering that area, Indo-Pacific. The term Indo-Pacific, I guess, was first used by a German philosopher, a general turned philosopher and a diplomat, Karl Haushoff. It's very difficult to pronounce the German names. I guess I have done fairly well. Karl Haushoff. He, in 1920, termed this region connecting, the connection between two oceans as Indo-Pacific in a very different, from a very different political perspective. In the Weimar Republic, very ambitious Weimar Republic, he wrote and tried to show that Indo-Pacific and the major countries of Indo-Pacific, which were under direct or indirect colonial rule, would be natural partners for Germany. They would side with Germany in the event of wars between the German side and the rest of Europe. But things have changed radically. So Indo-Pacific is no more a term that we can actually refer to him as his own kind of contribution. Even some people would mind if I name him because he was an ultra-nationalist personality. This term again came back in circulation when Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe delivered a speech at Indian Parliament in 2007. He described these two oceanic connection, Indian Ocean and Pacific Ocean. He said that this is a confluence of cultures and civilizations, a crossroad. And he said that let us make these two seas of freedom and prosperity. So it was kind of a very different presentation of the thought surrounding Indo-Pacific. Very different, actually entirely different. From then onwards, we have seen slowly and gradually Australia, Japan, and the United States of America taking more and more interest. And now it has come of age, this term. And this term is now an established connotation for geopolitical importance of the region. Where Bangladesh does stand geographically and historically in this connectivity. Let us go back into history again. And from the time Alexander invaded India, 3rd century BC, he had excellent geographers with him. For example, Ptolemy, who tried to draw the map of ancient world. And in one of his maps, Bay of Bengal was shown, not in proper and accurate shape. However, it was shown there, and there were a kingdom in Bengal called Ganga Ridai, or in our language, Ganga Riddhi. So Ganga Ridai and its port into Bay of Bengal, even that time, which was known as Tamrolitti. Even 2,300 years ago, that port was functioning, effective, etc., etc. Later, we saw emergence of Porto Grande in today's Chittagong, the port city of Bangladesh. So Porto Grande, of course, is a Portuguese word, and that was used by the Portuguese sailors when they used to refer to the Chittagong port of today. And that happened a couple of hundred years ago, like 15th century onwards. So as a littoral country or littoral state, Bangladesh has always been in the connectivity between Bangladesh, India, Indian subcontinent, Southeast Asia, and to some extent other parts of Asia. We are a riverine country, and we have a coastline of about 720 kilometers. So water is in our body. Of course, water is in vein of everybody. And we are a shipbuilding nation for a couple of hundreds of years. Ships built in Bengal were used in, for example, in the Battle of Trafalgar. So Bengal invented the flush deck concept used on boats, and today in particular, for example, in the aircraft carrier, for example. So flush deck is basically a concept according to which you have a second deck covering the whole surface area, so that water coming from one side of the ship in turbulent weather can flush out to the other side. So that was a contribution of the Bengali ship makers about a couple of 100 years ago. So we are a littoral state, we are a riverine country. World's largest number of rivers are concentrated in Bangladesh and in Greater Bangladesh. I mean, not Greater Bangladesh, Greater Bengal. About 200 plus rivers are there in Bengal, mostly concentrated in Bangladesh. They are a boon and a bane for us both. People have a tendency to see the rivers of Bangladesh only as a problem, that they create flooding, etc., etc. But actually, it is not the case. For us, we welcome flooding, because with flooding, every time, the Bengal Delta, the largest in the world, receives a fresh lease of life. So for us, it is actually helpful most of the time. Sometimes not, of course. Now, I would talk a bit about the past of Bangladesh. As you have rightly said, not so many people in Australia or in New Zealand have a fair idea about Bangladesh. And it's not their fault, it's rather our incapacity and lack of efforts that we should have put in place already to reach out to people. Bangladesh was, or Bengal was, always a rich place because of its abundance of water and fertile soil. For example, in 1700, in 1700 AD, at the height of the Mughal Empire in India and subcontinent, larger Bengal had a huge outburst of economic activities. And it is estimated that about 7% of world's GDP were coming from Bengal region. Actually, like Switzerland, we saw around that time a proto-industrialization movement in Bengal. We had shipbuilding industry, for example, sugar industry, for example, salt industry, for example, muslin and silk exported from Bengal. Now, what happened then? We were colonized, and colonization actually was a common curse, I guess, for all the countries that were colonized economically. However, with colonization, I think some good things also happened. For example, modernization came. People came to know about European philosophy and literature. The political consciousness of Europe came to the shores of the countries which were colonized. So, in fairness, one cannot simply rubbish colonization. Then we became part of Pakistan in 1947. And that was done basically on the foundation of our religious identity. Most of us are Muslims, and most of them are Muslims too. So there was a kind of political experiment. Division of India happened on the basis, basically, of religious identity. But then religious identity could not keep us together for a long time, because there were more pertinent and pragmatic issues involved, like fair share of national wealth, right to speak your language, cultural identity, etc., etc. So there was a very bitter separation of the two parts of Pakistan in 1971, very bitter. And of course, it did not happen over time. The nationality consciousness of the Bengalis or Bengalis had to take place before that, 200 years, etc. There was a kind of renaissance in Calcutta, in India, for example, and which actually the wave of which came to our shores also in the eastern part of Bengal. So all that actually melted ideas, gave birth to ideas, and the economic exploitation, cultural identity, etc. Those came into play. And finally, we separated from Pakistan. Now, when we separated from Pakistan, immediately after that, we were in the grip of one after another vagaries of nature and political problems, coup and counter-coup, all mired the image of Bangladesh so badly that people had little hope about the future of the country. So people used to say that this is going to be a basket case. Whatever you put in there, nothing will stay in the basket. So it is a kind of, it has no future. That used to be the common understanding. That kept on happening in our political and social scenario for next 20 years, I guess, or more than that. Since 1990, Bangladesh stepped into electoral democracy proper, 1990 onwards. And democracy, whatever we call democracy, some say that it is the worst form of governance. Some say that there is no better than this worst form of governance. I, as one, would never have a second thought about the importance of democracy. Nothing can happen beyond democracy. And there is nothing better than democracy. So from 1990 onwards, a country, Bangladesh, which used to depend a lot, hugely depend on foreign aid, we saw start of a time, every year, our dependency on foreign assistance declined, every year. And we could amass more of our national resources to fund our development projects from within our own pocket. So a country which used to depend in 1988, 89, 90 on almost 100% for any development project taken on foreign aid and assistance. Now, with a much larger purse to spend, we have only about 40% dependency on foreign aid. Remember, please, that in the meantime, we have been able to expand our budgetary outlay many folds. For example, in 1971, 72, 73 budget year, we had an outlay of about 280 million US dollars only. And now we have a budgetary outlay this year of about 62, 63 billion dollars. So that is the difference. In 1972, we had literacy rate of about 17%. And with population more than double of that number, we have 74% people now inside Bangladesh who are literate. In 1972, we had 4 public sector universities in Bangladesh. Now we have 150 plus universities in Bangladesh, 80 or so in the public sector, 70 or so in the private sector. In today's Bangladesh, we have life expectancy of about 74 for women and 73 for men. At that time, it used to be 44 and 45. So these things have happened. The governments in succession tried to do their bit. NGOs also worked well in Bangladesh in tandem with government's efforts. And our foreign friends, of course, including Australia, was greatly helping Bangladesh. And our farmers working on the fields were very innovative. And we could send abroad millions of people as seasonal workers and also as migrants. And now about 12 million of people of Bangladesh live abroad, most of them, of course, for seasonal working, and about 3 million permanently residing in different countries. And they fetch a huge number of remittance to the country. So in terms of our economy, I would say there are 3 pillars. One is agriculture, one is the remittance, about $22 billion, and the new ventures into industrialization, most important of those being ready-made garments and apparels, in which we are this world's second largest producer. Now, I would say that even during the very bad time that we saw in the 70s and 80s and early 90s, Bangladesh never failed in three things. One is it never failed in debt repayment. Bangladesh was never salvaged by bailout packages. And it never registered negative growth in any economic year. But since 2009, we have seen the outburst of the power of people. Since 2009 up till now, on an average, we have grown by about 6.5% annually. And every year we are able to reduce poverty by about 1 to 1.5%. So now in Bangladesh, out of 170 million people that it has, only about 20% are below poverty line or in the grip of abject poverty. About 7% of the 20% that I talked about are in the grip of abject poverty still. So we have abject poverty of about 7%. We have poverty line, not abject poverty, of about 14%. And the rest are either low middle income, or rich people. In Bangladesh today, we have 50 million people who are solvent by any standard, by any international standard. So you may imagine what kind of economy do we possess with a baseline of $420 billion. It used to be 460 billion. Actually, we reached 460 billion, but then it has dwindled back a bit due to devaluation of our currency against dollar. So now it's about 420 or a little more than that. And 50 million, middle class or upper middle class, with an average growth rate of 7% or 6.5%, that kind of number. Bangladesh has all the possibilities of becoming a very large economy in a decade or so. According to some projection, by 2041, Bangladesh should be $1.5 trillion economy. By 2032, Bangladesh will exceed $1 trillion mark. So we are almost there. However, we still have challenges like unresolved political issues are there, climate change issues are there. Also, there are social issues like unemployment, and to some extent, misgovernance also is an issue for us. But we are democratic in spirit, and we like to engage in debate, conversation, discussion of all types. So from that point of view, we do not actually are very different from the Western values, because the Western value, as we understand, is basically engaging within the society on issues that require attention. In Bangladesh, we have that kind of energy and spirit. And I think to some extent that is a Bengali spirit too. Bengalis are actually known for their differences of opinion, and all the major political parties of Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan were born in Bengal, in Calcutta or in Dhaka. For example, Pakistan Muslim League was born in Dhaka. Indian National Congress was born in Calcutta, and the ruling party of India, BJP, was also to some extent handiwork of a Bengali, Shama Prasad Mukherjee. So Bengalis are, very thoughtful people, sometimes, of course, chaotic and indisciplined. What actually characterized Bangladesh, beyond whatever I have said, are religious moderation, tendency to or favor, sympathy for religious moderation. 90% people of Bangladesh are Muslim by faith, but we have a substantial number of Hindu population in Bangladesh, and we have also Buddhists and Christians in Bangladesh. And we don't want to see anybody actually stays bereft or stays back, lag behind. We don't want that. Syncretic culture is another hallmark of our society, because we were Hindus before, long time ago. We were Buddhists at some points of time. Now we are Muslims. So in our language and in our thought process, in our music and in our literature, these actually reflect. They bear these changes. So it is a syncretic culture that we possess and try to nurture. I would then go for, I think, if I have time.
Yes, please. Yes.
Okay. I have talked a bit about economic issues. Let me say that in terms of export, we are now, and also in terms of total size of the economy, we are the second largest in South Asia out of the 8 countries that South Asia has. After India, we are the second largest economy. And our growth potential, as I said, is huge. We have done fairly well in ready-made garments, and we are trying to do a bit in ICT, as you have mentioned. We are self-sufficient in pharmaceutical products. 96% of the medicines that the people of Bangladesh, 170 million, consume, actually 96% are produced locally. Only 4% are imported. And we do export medicines to many, many different countries, albeit in a small number. For example, some cancer treatment drugs are going to New Zealand. We have registered our products with European Union and also US FDA. We are also strong in leather industries. 3% of the world's leather wares come from Bangladesh. And again, we are going back into shipbuilding. And there are a couple of privately owned shipbuilding industries in Bangladesh. And there's one government-owned shipbuilding industry in Bangladesh. We have had the experience of selling ships of moderate size and ferries to countries like Germany, Sweden, and Denmark, for example. And there are numerous other fields like ceramics, etc., etc. I would talk a bit about foreign policy of Bangladesh as well. Then I'll go to the region. Peace-seeking, inclusive, engaging, and pragmatic foreign policy that we follow. We are nestled between great powers, 2 great powers, and we live in the shadow of, some say, Indochina. We are very closely linked geographically and even to some extent culturally to Southeast Asia, because at Bangladesh, South Asia ends and Southeast Asia begins. So Southeast Asia and those 2 great powers are there. And that, of course, is a very strategic location, but we don't want to trumpet and oversell the geostrategic importance of Bangladesh. That we don't want to. We are not a militaristic nation at all. We have a large and professional military, though, and I was a bit surprised presently to see that Bangladesh's navy is now world's 16th strongest navy. To me, that was a news. According to firepower ranking, we are 40th largest military, and our great neighbor is 4th, while our eastern neighbor, the naughty boy in the classroom, is 38th. So our target, naturally, would be to topple them, to go over them in terms of military strength. We have to manage our relations with all the great powers. Why? Because we cannot afford to have inimical relations with anyone. We have a large population to feed and a large population to nourish. So we cannot have that luxury of having geostrategic relationship with major powers. We don't want that. That is not our preference. We would like to be comfortable with everybody and give and take pragmatically with anybody and everybody interested in us. So that is the hallmark of our public relations in the international affairs. Bangladesh, geographically, has also another character. One, I have mentioned that it is a bridge between South Asia and Southeast Asia. But interestingly, Bangladesh, as it was carved out of Bengal, is a connector between the mainland India and the Indian Northeast. So on almost, almost three sides of Bangladesh, we have India. 4,000 plus kilometers of border we have with India. That is the world's sixth longest land border. But we also have a border with Myanmar or Burma, which is about 270 kilometers. We have, as I mentioned earlier, 720 kilometers of coastal line. That is the geographic identity of Bangladesh. And given its problems, its difficulties, the requirement to strike a balance between the resources that Bangladesh commands and the need to address the needs of the people, millions of toiling masses. Bangladesh, as I mentioned, has always preferred to have a kind of direct discussion with all powers or blocs interested in it, very openly and candidly. And given all this, actually, Bangladesh has also been an initiator of two regional blocs. Bangladesh can, I think nobody would counterclaim, Bangladesh was the country which proposed the formation of SAARC, South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, and at a later stage, which is at the moment little dysfunctional, but it is there. A time may come when it will be rejuvenated. And Bangladesh is also gave the idea of BIMSTEC, Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multi-Sectoral Cooperation in Economic Fields and Technical Fields. And in BIMSTEC, we have incorporated Burma and also Thailand. From South Asia, India and Sri Lanka are there. And BIMSTEC headquarters are in Dhaka. So that is our offer of some kind of regional diplomacy with a very clean idea that the regional countries, all under some kind of duress, should come together for co-prosperity in the Bay of Bengal region. That was the philosophy behind those two initiatives. BIMSTEC is not dysfunctional. It had its regular meetings and its living. Hopefully, it will be able to offer the the member countries some bonanza. Australia, as I said, recognized Bangladesh early on. Since its inception, it was the first developed country to have recognized Bangladesh as an independent country. And its mission started in Dhaka in 1973. And we also did not take any time to reciprocate by opening up our mission here. So our High Commission in Canberra is one of our oldest diplomatic outposts abroad. Despite all these niceties and good track records, I think my Australian counterparts would not disagree with me if I say that we have not done fairly well in advancing our causes, common causes, in right and proper direction. But things have started changing with a more affluent Bangladesh in visibility, and Australia's renewed interest or new interest in Asian politics and in Indo-Pacific relations, and also since 2020, its interest in South Asia with the publication of the Defense Review of 2020. Australia has put officially a lot of stress on its relations with South Asian countries. And today, for example, there is a military attaché in your High Commission in Dhaka, and we also are planning to bring in a military guy from our military. So we want to make good use of the geostrategic possibilities while keeping focus and attention more on trade and economic cooperation. Today, Bangladesh and Australia bilateral trade is about 2.6, 2.7 billion Australian dollars, which is not enough. That makes Bangladesh the 32nd largest trading partner for Australia. Not enough. We should be able to actually double the amount, 2.7 into, let's say, $5 billion plus. And with that in mind, the two countries signed Trade and Investment Framework Agreement in 2019. And since there has been a good number of changes between the two countries in terms of business delegations. This year also, we received so far 2 business delegations from Bangladesh. There is political dialogue between our 2 foreign ministries every year, which is called political consultation. And there is a specific body dedicated to take stock of commercial matters, known as Joint Working Group on Trade Matters, etc. So Australian aid and assistance is greatly appreciated by us, while we are reducing happily our dependence on any kind of foreign assistance. Now, what can we do about trade and commerce or investment is a thing to see. Australian investors are more into money market, that we know, and therefore our attention and attempt should be made to draw in their attention to Bangladesh money market, capital market, etc. But that may take some time. In the meantime, we have identified a few areas beyond ready-made garments where we are already 11.5% in Australia's import, making us the second exporter into Australian market. We want to augment that percentage by a few percentage, of course. But we would like to see more of cooperation in hydrogen technology, for example, that Australia is doing very well in. Joint collaboration and research on climate mitigation. Little more cooperation, joint ventures in wood industries and also in wool industries, because Australian wool is exported raw, basically, to other countries. And that is not good for us because we are not an wool, we don't have any processing plant in Bangladesh. And now we are trying to actually add value and go upscale in the value chain, going more into suiting, for example, for which you need wool. So wool processing, jointly undertaken, wool processing can be a very good, mutually beneficial project. We are also trying to do a bit in education cooperation and also ICT cooperation. So these are our priorities as High Commission. Time is almost up, almost.
I'm sure there are questions.
Recently, in April this year, Bangladesh has published its IPO, Indo-Pacific Outlook, which, according to observers, is more of a basic paper. It's not exactly a set of policies that we have come out with. It's outlook, and from there onward, we will develop. And as I said earlier, that our preference is for economic cooperation. And for that, with that in mind, we of course would like to see free and unintimidated flow of commerce and economic exchanges among the countries of the region. Because Indian Ocean is home to, houses about 3,000 species of fish, which is by far the largest repository of fish reserves in the world. About 80% of the petroleum of the world actually go through Indian Ocean. About 100,000 vessels ply between ports in Indian Ocean. So we would like to keep, as a country, as a party, as an emerging country, we would like to see a situation where this go on uninterrupted, and we as parties, littoral states, should come forward to tap the possibilities. Bangladesh is also currently the chair of AIIA, Indian Ocean Rim Association, and we are happy that your Assistant Minister for Foreign Affairs visited Dhaka this year twice, and that also is a kind of manifestation of Australia's interest in Bangladesh. And as a founding member of AIIA, Bangladesh would like to see its functioning well and giving what it is promised to give. I would stop here. I think I'm going beyond my time limit, and it's a very vast, very big subject. And I would like to interact with my audience. If you have any question, whatever the question may be, I would try to answer.
Well, thank you, High Commissioner. You've given us a lot of material there to work on, I think. So we'll get started straight away in the 20 minutes we have left. And if people want to make a question, please do. Please identify yourselves and speak clearly so we can hear, and keep your questions short. First of all, High Commissioner, if I could get you to focus a little bit more on Bangladesh's probably greatest resource. You mentioned agriculture, remittances, and apparel industries, but the human element. You mentioned the development of universities. But if we're looking at the importance of those industries, the modern industries in technology and so on, how does Bangladesh's education and vocational training measure up to drive those changes, those economic growth areas?
Certainly, I cannot very proudly say that we have done fairly well in that direction. But as I mentioned, there are two aspects of education, I guess, and in your question also that was reflected. One is education for all. One is education for a few who deserve that. And third one would be education in the form of a skill development for many. We have more than 150 universities, and some of them are internationally well known. I cannot say that there is even one world-class institute in Bangladesh. I cannot say so. That would be lying, actually. But there are some universities in Bangladesh who are internationally, exposed, having collaboration with many universities around the world, including some Australian universities. If you look at the number of academics that Bangladesh has produced, I would then take you to Australian universities. Today, there is one Australian university which is led by a Bangladeshi as Vice Chancellor. And I guess there would be 300, 400 plus academics teaching at different universities in Australia.
Which was that university that you mentioned? UWA.
Yes. We have collaboration in the field of public health between RMIT in Melbourne and ICDDRB in Bangladesh. We have collaboration between our CISRO, which we call BCS IRO, with Melbourne University, for example. RMIT. And Charles Stewart and ICDDRB, sorry. Yeah. And as I mentioned in my statement, that as High Commission, one of our targets is to create more connections between our universities and Australian universities. We have produced thousands of faculties for USA, for the United Kingdom, and for the country itself. And there are people who regularly visit Bangladesh, of Bangladesh origin, and teach periodically at our universities. So that is one side. As I have mentioned about literacy rate, that despite having 170 million people, we have been consistent in spreading literacy in the four corners of the country, which is now 74% or more. And our goal, of course, is to reach 100%. Skill development is also a very important sector for us. The government has set up more than 100 skill development training centers. We call them TTC, technical training centers. More than 100 are there in the government sector. In the private sector, there are more. And some foreign entities are also in skill development sector in Bangladesh. For example, there is Korea, Bangladesh Technical Training Center, German, Bangladesh Technical Training Center, and Japan, Bangladesh, or JICA-led Technical Training Center in Bangladesh. And now we are pursuing this case, the similar case, with the TAFE, various TAFEs of Australia, that instead of spending your money for supporting just some, social issues, social development issues, why don't you take some of your money into and put that into joint collaboration in the skill development sector? And that we can easily call Australia-Bangladesh Friendship Technical Center, etc., etc., etc. So I would restrain myself from calling our efforts into education as very good, not to be accoladed. I'm not very happy about that personally, but I would say that we are not bad.
That's a good reply. Yes, sir. Please.
Thank you very much, Excellency. Actually, in relation to his the question about education, my interest is basically the demographic dividends. Now we have 68% of total population. They have the ability to work. That means they are in between 15 to 64 years of age. That means 110 million people they can work. So, what is your plan? What is the Bangladesh's plan to employ these, the huge population into the workforce? Because only the probably if I don't miss or if I don't the essence of this question, I think he wanted to say how to turn the the values of education to workforce. So can you comment on that?
We have about 2 million educated people coming out into job market every year. And it's a humongous challenge to provide them with job opportunity. So we have, you can say, a two-pronged strategy. One is employment within the periphery of the country, within the boundary of the country. And the other one is to send them abroad as workers. Workers from Bangladesh are going to various destinations on regular basis. And regularly, some of them are coming back, being more affluent, economically, more potent, more powerful. Their families are living better. Their children or family members are getting more chances for higher education within home, within the country. So that has a multiplier effect already on our society and economy. When it comes to employment generation within the country, I would say that the government has planned this way, that we are trying to set up 100 special economic zones in Bangladesh, SEZs, and 1/4 of them are already functioning. Some of them are smaller, covering a surface area of about 40-50 acres. Some of them are as large as 30,000 acres. So this is how we expect to draw in investment from home and abroad, set up industries, and employ people. Before, in the 80s and 90s, we have had a miniature success, a miniature experiment in this type or in this category. We used to call them export processing zones, EPZs. And there are 8 EPZs set in Bangladesh. They are all functioning very well. And from the EPZ production, Bangladesh earns about $2 billion out of its $52 or $53 billion total export. Actually, $2 billion comes from EPZs. And now we are doing this SEZ program. There are dedicated SEZs also given to countries of significance who have showed interest, like India, for example, Japan, for example, Malaysia. There are dedicated EPZs for them. We would be very happy if someday Australian investors who are not particularly known to be manufacturing investors. Australian investors are more into money market, as I said earlier. However, we'd be very happy if we can offer Australian investors a piece of land as Australia's SEZ in Bangladesh. So that is the basic idea. The other idea, of course, is generate self-employment through small business. As you mentioned in your introductory remarks, Bangladesh has actually the largest pool of freelancers in the IT sectors in the world. Largest pool, like 600,000 plus people are self-employed, being in their house or taking a small bit of land, space in a multi-level apartment. In some kiosks, 10 people are working. In some places, even one person is working independently. And in some cases, farms employ 100 people, let's say. So that's an idea. Startup business is an idea that we are trying to actually look into.
Oh,
This is
very good. Okay. Yes, another question at the back there, please.
My name is Betsy Carty. I'm from Papua. I'm currently a chief fellow at the Seapower Center. It's a pleasure. Thank you for your information. My question is, what is the two biggest or major challenges in you see in Bangladesh, and how does Bangladesh fight against it?
First is environmental challenge. That would be the biggest challenge for us because we have flooding, sometimes cyclone, sometimes river erosion cause problems. And with the change in the global patterns of seasonal happenings, we receive some battering from that also. So we have to take care of those. But while I say so, let me also underscore that insofar as flooding and cyclone are concerned, Bangladesh has been able to make its own management improved. And one of your prime ministers, I think Mr. Kevin Rudd, when he was prime minister back in 2013, I think I read somewhere, he actually acknowledged the advancement that Bangladesh made on its own in terms of cyclone preparedness and flood preparation, flood problem mitigation preparation. For example, we have more than 50,000 volunteers trained by the government agencies who are always ready to come out on the streets, go to the villages, warn people, take them to cyclone shelters. Within the notice of, say, 1 day, within the notice of 1 day, they can do that. As a result, the number of casualties from cyclone has come down very drastically, down to almost zero. While we had in 1970 a very bad cyclone battering our coastal area that killed about 300 to 500,000 people. And that was the last nail in the coffin of Pakistan, because the government of Pakistan at that time did not do well in mitigating the problems of the people of Bangladesh. So that was the last nail in the coffin. However, now, on an average,